School Board Director Bruce Thompson has joined us. Welcome.
Well, good evening. I'm Mayor Tom Barrett, and I'm very pleased to be here. I want to begin by thanking Roxanne, thanking Daryl, thanking LULAC, the PTA, thanking Pastor Thompson, all of you, UMOS, for hosting us here tonight. I want to just take a couple minutes and tell you why I feel so passionately about this issue and why I think the stakes are so high for our community. And I can begin by actually going back to one of the charts that we had here, and that pointed out that 90% of the fastest growing professions and 60% of all current jobs require vocational or college education. That's the job scene that we have in Milwaukee and the Milwaukee area. But that's just the job scene for those jobs that are being created. What about our pool of labor and those jobs that are the transitional jobs or the entry-level jobs that so many of our citizens and residents of low educational status are capable of filling? In other words, those jobs that have the least amount of skills necessary. A recent study by UWM projected or estimated that for each one of those jobs, each one of those transitional entry-level jobs in Milwaukee, there are 25 people looking for those jobs. That's the problem that we have here in Milwaukee right now. We simply do not have enough jobs for those individuals who are at the lowest end of the educational ladder. Now, for those jobs that are higher up the educational ladder, we start actually having a shortage, where we have more jobs available than we have people who can fill those jobs. Why is this important to me as mayor? Well, 50 years ago in this community, what you needed to succeed was a strong back and a good alarm clock. And the reason I say that is because we had so many great brewery jobs, and tannery jobs, and factory jobs, and foundry jobs. Jobs where an individual could leave high school, whether they graduated or not, and could get a job where they could support their families. There was recently an article in the paper that talked about A.O. Smith, when A.O. Smith was located on Capitol Drive. And the fellow came to work here in 1964. He came from Mississippi because his father told him, come to Milwaukee, there's lots of jobs. And at that time, if you didn't like your job, you could quit your job, go to another factory, get hired, and start working the same day, third shift. That's what Milwaukee was like a generation or two ago. Well, fast forward, and what's happened? Many of those jobs have gone to the southern states, they've gone to Mexico, they've gone to China. And the reality is, those jobs that don't require an education, that can be moved, are being moved. And so we're faced with two choices. We can, from my standpoint, we can curse the darkness and say we don't have enough jobs. Let's create more jobs for those people at the lowest end of the economic scale. And my response is the government cannot create enough of those jobs. And the private sector is not creating enough of those jobs. So we can curse the darkness as to where we are, or we can accept what I consider to be the biggest challenge that this city and American cities face right now in this country, and that is to raise the educational attainment for the young people who are in our schools. This is about the children. This is about making sure that our children, and I mean all of our children in this community, have the skills to get the jobs that will allow them to support their families. So what's my beef with the current system? Well, you've seen some of the statistics. I think that the people who have served Milwaukee in the Milwaukee Public Schools are good people. I think they care about the community. I think they care about the children. But I think we have to raise this to the next level. And what I have seen in those communities who have done this successfully, and I use that phrase carefully because there are some communities who have not done this successfully, and I look at Detroit as an example. But I look at Chicago, I look at Washington, I look at New York City, I look at some of the progress they've made there in Boston, and where they have gone by having this reform, by having a reform where the mayor is the accountable person. This is really sort of unusual in politics, where you've got someone who says, I want to be held responsible. Usually what happens is you've got the finger pointing that it's their fault or his fault or her fault or their fault. I think that's got to stop. And I think by having a mayoral form of governance, you will know who the person is who should be held responsible. I think accountability is extremely important in this. And I can't think of a time in the history of this city when the stakes as they pertain to education have ever been higher. They've never been higher. Because as Mike said, our competitors are not necessarily the Chicagos and the San Franciscos. Our competitors are those foreign countries. And we have to do a much better job in preparing our children to meet those challenges. I'll talk more about specifically the type of reform that I'm talking about, but I just wanted to lay out why I feel so passionately about this issue and why I think it's so necessary for us not to embrace the status quo, but rather to embrace reforms. Thank you.